Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of VCU Gerontology Community and Continuing Education's Compassion Fatigue series. In our last video, we discussed what compassion fatigue can look like and feel like. If you missed it, I suggest you check it out, video number 2, because understanding how compassion fatigue shows up allows us to see those warning lights, so to speak, and alerts us to make a change. Today, however, I really wanted to talk with you about compassion fatigue risk factors, aka what characteristics or situations can place someone at an increased risk for feeling this compassionate exhaustion. Any individual in a situation who you're caring for others has a risk of developing compassion fatigue. However, certain characteristics can place some people at an even higher risk. Okay. So as we did in video 2, I want you to grab a pen and paper and draw a line or a check mark for each risk factor that you identify with as we review them. Okay, pause the video if you need to, and let's get started. Let's start with the 3 major personal risk factors that can place you at an increased risk of compassion fatigue. These personal risk factors are what's going on at an individual level. Personal risk factors for feeling compassion fatigue include being a perfectionist. If you are the type of person who just has to get it right and beat yourself up if things didn't go the way you wanted or expected them to, you might be at an increased risk of compassion fatigue. The second personal risk factor is selflessness. If you consider yourself a self-giving person, if you're highly invested in the emotional and physical needs of those around you, that can increase your risk of developing compassion fatigue. The third personal risk factor I want to talk about with you is personal stress and isolation. As humans, we all have stress, and eradicating stress completely is unrealistic. But how do you handle your stress? Do you tend to bottle up that stress, push it down, and avoid dealing with your emotions? Do you have support from friends or family that you can count on? Or do you feel isolated? And quick side note, I'm not implying that any of these characteristics are inherently bad. If anything, most of these factors have been helpful to you, most likely, and are human nature for us when we're caring for others. If your job, either as a parent, a healthcare worker, or all the other places that a caring relationship is required, then it's really important to hold yourself to high standards and be emotionally invested. But if you don't give yourself the space to ask yourself the right questions and shift that same support and love towards yourself, you can't maintain that for others, right? I don't want to get too ahead of myself here, and we'll dive deeper into that topic of self-compassion in a later video. So for now, let's get back on track with professional risk factors. These are areas shaped by either the nature of our specific career path or how we personally interact with our professional career. So here are 3 professional risk factors that can increase our risk of developing compassion fatigue. The need to control your own emotions when faced with others' trauma and intense emotions is the first risk factor. If you feel like you have to be on or performing at work, or if you are having to continuously witness the suffering of others, that can lead to an increased risk for developing compassion fatigue. The second risk factor is seeing your job as your identity. So for me, thinking that I am Caroline, I am a physical therapist, instead of I am Caroline and physical therapy is my passion. Physical therapy is what I do for work. The third risk factor I will mention is feeling a lack of control over your professional life. So if you feel like you aren't really seeing feedback, receiving feedback, or recognition from others for the work you're doing, it might make you question if the work you're doing is really making a difference. Okay, finally, I want to talk about organizational risk factors. These are characteristics regarding your environment that may feel outside of your control. However, it's important to talk about your external environment for 3 main reasons. 1, your outside environment does have an influence on your internal environment, which can be either a positive influence or a negative influence. Number 2, being aware of your environment and the role that it plays on your well-being is really important when you're considering what you need. And third, changing your internal environment and your actions that align with self-compassion can make a change in the way that you interact with your external environment. Okay, so with that being said, here are 3 organizational or environmental aspects that increase your risk of developing compassion fatigue. The first environmental risk factor is pretty intuitive. A high workload can increase your risk of developing burnout and or compassion fatigue. So a high workload can look like working with several individuals in a given day if you're a healthcare worker like me. If the people that you work with have intensive needs or have challenging behaviors, or also for my healthcare people, we all know about the perils of documentation or administrative needs that need to be done, which take a big chunk of time and energy out of our day and leaves less time for actually being present with and providing a caring response for those that need it. In addition to a high workload, we can look at the organization of management. If your organization has frequent change or turnover, that can be so frustrating and feels like nothing gets done. Management and administration issues can be related to things like limited time for training or limited mentorship. There can be a lack of feedback provided to you on your performance, or it can lead to incompatible requests. AKA, one person tells you to do something, but another person tells you to do it another way, or what your supervisor is telling you to do doesn't really make sense or fit with the reality of the situation. It just feels disorganized, and it can lead to excessive stress and a lack of control, and it ultimately puts you at an increased risk of compassion fatigue. The final organizational risk factor I want to mention is a workplace culture of silence. This last one, I think, is maybe the most important because it contributes to what I call the shame spiral. So what is a culture of silence? It's when you're struggling and maybe other people are struggling, but it's not normal to talk about it in a constructive way or talk about it at all. For those who are parents or those who work in healthcare, I know that there is this consistent underlying pressure we all place on ourselves to be like, this is my calling because I'm a caring person. So to feel bad or feel tired, or when you want to call it in or even just take a break, oh no, that's not who I am. And what's worse, no one else around you is talking about this. Sure, people don't like every aspect of their job, but everyone else seems fine. So it must just be me. There's something wrong with me. Maybe I'm not cut from the same cloth. Maybe I don't have what it takes to stay in this position or this career like I thought I did. Maybe I'm just a bad parent or a bad physical therapist or a bad nurse, et cetera, fill in the blank. This is what a culture of silence can do to our internal narrative. We as humans think that admitting to our personal needs or our experiences will somehow make us weaker, but not talking about these things with each other is so detrimental because we feel like we're alone. We don't get to see that almost every single person around us has felt this way or is maybe even feeling this way right now. So it is so important to talk about these things, to normalize it, because it is so human of us to have and share these experiences. Okay, stepping off the soapbox. I hope this video on risk factors was helpful. I know we covered a lot here. So if you have any questions or if you resonated with anything we talked about, please comment or send us an email or a message and let's talk about it. All right, friends, my name is Caroline Williams, and I hope that you will join me in our 4th video where we talk about the actual causes of compassion fatigue. This next video is full of really great information, and I hope to see you there.